For the first time in the history of Canada's top court, an Indigenous justice will sit on the Supreme Court. Michelle O'Bonsawin was appointed earlier this year to that job. She joins me in studio. Justice O'Bonsawin, thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you very much.
You were at the ceremony today on Parliament Hill. I wonder what your reflections are on a day like this.
I thought it was really important to have such a gathering of people, all in the common unality of getting everyone together to discuss residential schools, the impact that it has had. I heard a lot of women speaking about the intergenerational trauma. So it was good to have that sharing, and I saw a lot of people who weren't wearing orange T-shirts that were curious, that came and saw what it was about, and I was glad to see that it wasn't just Indigenous people. It was all kinds of different Canadians that were there together.
Where do you think we are as a country on this? I mean, you can see these large-scale gatherings and outpourings on this day in particular, but all the other days in between. Where do you think Canada is in the path towards reconciliation?
I think we're evolving. I think since the TRC gave all of its 94 recommendations, we've just improved every year, because at the end of the day, the finding of the burial sites last year, I think, was a wake-up call to many Canadians who really wasn't sure where they fell on this issue. But I think it brought it to the forefront, and I think that now everyone's cognizant of what's going on.
It kind of made it real to people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like
exactly.
It made it tangible and measurable in a way I guess it kind of hadn't been before for a lot of people.
Absolutely, and I think that the reality of it was really striking.
You know, my kids today, they went to school, right? I've got two boys, 5 and 8. You know, they went in the orange T-shirts. They're learning about this in a way I never learned about this growing up. And they ask about it. It's something I struggle to talk to them about, right? I don't know what the right thing is to say. I mean, you've got two boys as well, right? How did you talk to your kids when they were growing up about this particular? How do you talk to them about it now?
I've talked to them about what my father told me about the discrimination he suffered when he was younger, about being called Le Petit Sauvage of Sunnybury and Sudbury. I've talked to them about the great work that Mary Sinclair did on the TRC. And also what I did was I read to them portions of the executive summary, because I think that that's where the education begins. The content in that executive summary is really powerful. And even though my kids were younger, I thought it was important for them to really get an idea of what was residential schools, how did it impact people, what's intergenerational trauma, and how are we resilient as a people and moving on from there.
What advice would you have for someone like me, who's got a couple of boys who are going to come home today from learning about this in school, how I talk to them about it and how other parents talk to them about it? Because you have this instinct to shelter your kids from ugly truths, but they need to know what happened, and they need to understand it. And I find as we talk about it, they can see the awfulness of history very plainly at the age of 5 and 8. I mean, but how do you talk to them about it, to confront the country's history?
I think a good starting point is to talk about what was discovered last year about the mass burial sites. What did that come from? How did those children get to be in the earth? And for you yourself and others to read the executive summary of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report. And I think that's the starting point, to pick out the most important things to relate to your children in language that they'll understand, because I know they're smaller, so they're not like my boys that are now 16 and 18, so their language is more developed, they get a better understanding, but to bring it down to their level, just to talk to them about residential schools and the impact that it had on those children and how it's impacted their lives as adults and also their family members.
You know, you're sitting now in the highest court in the land. I mean, what role does that institution play in this? I mean, because a lot of the ugliness of the history, the courts played a role in a lot of the problems in the past and has to be part of the solution now. I mean, how do you think the Supreme Court can play a role going forward in the entire justice system?
I think they've played a role in the past where they've interpreted, for example, Gladue and Ipeely in those cases where they talk about Gladue principles. So those are sentencing principles where a judge has to look at the background of the individual person, Indigenous person in front of them. So I think that they've really played a role in that. Chilcotin First Nation, they played a role on the land rights. And we're going to continue to have cases in front of us. So I think it's just going to continue to evolve, and I think it's very positive.
How do you approach your role as a justice of the Supreme Court? I mean, how does it inform how you approach interpreting the law?
I've always said, and you may have heard me say this in the past, that I'm a judge first, because at the end of the day, I have to be impartial. But, you know, as all the other judges that sit on the court, I have my own background that's unique to myself as a bilingual Indigenous woman, a mother, and these inform my decisions. They don't drive them, but definitely they inform them.
But when you look at the way the court has been constructed, there's always been an emphasis on linguistic and regional representation, right? And that's sort of been the structure. I mean, how important do you think it is, the nature of your appointment as the first Indigenous woman to sit on this court?
I think it's important because, as with every first, we had Justice Jamal, who was named last year, myself this year. It's just important because people want to see themselves reflected on courts and where they're appearing in front of. So I think the more that we see diversity on the court, the better it is, and I'm just a part of that.
You know, you're just a part of it, you say, but it is the highest court in the land, and you're there, and we do have an Inuk woman, and Mary Simon, as the Governor General now. Institutions that would have been seen as colonial agencies in the past now have Indigenous women sitting on them. I mean, what kind of a message do you think that sends, or symbol do you think that is for people when they're looking at where the country is right now?
I'm hoping it's going to inspire our youth, especially young women, because we are women who come from different backgrounds that aren't the typical norm. We've worked our way up, and I'm hoping that it'll inspire young people to say, I could do that.
This is the second Truth and Reconciliation Day that we've had as a national holiday. I mean, what do you want to see happen between the second and the third? What would you like to see happen in this country between now and this holiday next year?
For me, it's to have the discussion, because the more we talk about it, the more that we're going to have, instead of just having plans, we're going to put them into action. And I think that's what it is to have the discussions, to put forward plans, and then to put them to action and to follow through on them. So I'm hoping that, for example, the 94 calls that came from the TRC, just movement to keep going through them. We had the Vien Commission in Quebec, same thing. So when we have these recommendations, hopefully we'll put them to action.
Was there a moment that stood out for you today in everything you saw in the ceremony you attended? I mean, the unfurling of the red banner with the names is a very powerful symbol that we saw today. Was there something that stood out for you?
I saw a young boy sing with a drum, and for me that was really touching, because for me that's the youth who are proud to be Indigenous, proud to be able to sing in front of a crowd, and I thought that was really amazing for this little boy to be able to do that.
Right. Well, Justice Abansman, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Uliuni.
Hi, I'm Vashi Capellos, host of Power in Politics. See more of our show by subscribing to the CBC News channel or click the link for another video.